We'll just jump into it. I was thinking like I could send you a whole bunch of questions, but I'm like, let's just go by the seat of our
Yeah,
pants.
just having a conversation is kind of the easiest thing for me. Before you hit play, I've
Yep.
got my daughter with me because she's out of school. So
Okay.
I want to let her know, look, Daddy's about to start a meeting.
Yeah.
I need you to stay in there. And if she happens to interrupt, I'm so used to it, we can just keep
Just
flowing.
keep
And if
going. Yeah.
yeah,
I
okay.
got a 5-year-old, so I
All right.
know.
You know how it goes. Yeah, I got
Yeah.
my 3-year-old with me, not my 21-year-old. My 21-year-old would actually like stay. My 3-year-old, it's a roll of the dice. I don't know.
That's
So
okay.
hold on, let me let her know.
Sounds good, man.
Turn it up.
Okay, Andy. Good to catch up with you. I've met you like just over a year ago in person, but I feel like I've known you for much longer. So that's how I roll, I guess, and that's how you roll. So, you know, we, can connect like at any point in time we can talk and it feels like, hey, we just talked the other day. So those are the kind of relationships that I like. And what I want to do with this conversation is let people know about all the good stuff that you're doing right now. We'll talk a bit about, how you developed as a coach, but I really want to hear, and I want other people to hear about, what you're doing now, your day to day, how you manage things, how you work with athletes, how you get results, and then let's just go from there, okay? So what are some things that you're doing right now?
So, I mean, my day to day job right now is trying to figure out how to just be the visionary and CEO of BCI Sport Performance and Fitness. This is my 17th year in business, and I'm a coach and a coach first. I got into this really kind of out of survival, and we could talk about that later on. But I knew my easiest access point into the training industry was as a coach and as a trainer. But I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit inside me and wanted to be able to make a larger impact. I think when I was younger, it was very much about making money. But now there's a deeper purpose about impacting my community and helping and change lives. And that's what I do. Primarily, we work with athletes, but we also do have a relatively large adult and general fitness population component to our business, too. And I oversee about 6 trainers and a manager. And we serve a couple hundred athletes and a couple hundred adults through various different programs. We've got programs for 8 years old all the way up to NFL and professional athletes. And on the general fitness side, we've got large group, small group, kind of high end one on one, post rehab, and everything in between. My job right now is really facilitating the growth of our trainers, developing systems that allow us to be more efficient at how we do things. And then strategically, at certain times of the year, I throw my coach hat back on, specifically usually from January to April, working with NFL athletes, and then June to August. And we'll have some other guys sprinkled in here and there. Like we've got some Major League Baseball guys in here right now. But I actually kind of push those towards one of our coaches that has a little bit more expertise as a baseball player and coach as well. So on the side, I've got a consulting business where I help people in the private market space figure out how to set up their business in a way that serves them. And I provide mentorship that I wish I had had. Growing up in this industry, I didn't have a lot of mentors because I started before the internet. It really wasn't as easy to connect. And I wasn't even on social media until about 7 years ago. Maybe a little bit longer than that now. But when I got onto social media, it was amazing. It's allowed me to connect with more people and the opportunity to mentor young coaches that may be struggling to kind of get their foot in the door or to make an impact in their community is something incredibly important to me.
Now, when you started and you were coaching and you're working with athletes, was this stuff in the plan? Like, hey, I'm going to start mentoring people. I'm going to have a consulting business, or was it just an organic thing that just happened?
It was very organic. Like I didn't go. So I became a father at 16 years old. I was on my own shortly thereafter. I lived in the Washington, D.C. area. My parents moved out here a couple years after. I followed them out here and it was like, look, only thing I know how to do at this point is train people. I'd worked as a trainer in the Washington, D.C. area. But again, I kind of had this entrepreneurial spirit and I was like, all right, I'm going to replicate what I had seen. And the guy that I worked for in the Washington, D.C. area had exclusivity contracts at all the Gold's gyms around the D.C. metro area. So my goal was to show up here, develop a franchise prototype, sell it, make millions of dollars, and boom, I'm the man, right? I started to figure out that chasing a dollar wasn't as fulfilling, nor did I enjoy really working in the general fitness population. So I moved out here at about 2001. By 2004, I kind of pushed all my chips in, said I'm getting out of general fitness and I'm just going to work with athletes. And around that time, nobody was really doing that in the area that I'm at now. I was actually the first high school strength and conditioning coach in our area. I was the first person to ever run a speed camp. So kind of being first to market helped me establish a name and a reputation in this area. And then organically, things just started to evolve. It then became, I want to open this really big sport performance facility. Well, once we opened the sport performance facility, it was like, well, now I think I want to work with adults again, because if I can impact athletes down here and I can impact adults up here, that gives us the best chance to create change. Because ultimately, the limiting factors in a lot of lifestyle decisions for athletes are regulated by their parents, especially if you're talking about 8 years old to 17-ish. So we went all the way back in on adults so we could address both populations. As you know, we met at a seminar, and almost everybody I know in the industry I've met at seminars. And just through my conversations with friends and colleagues I respect, they were like, Andy, why aren't you helping people with this stuff? And my thing was like, I don't know if I deserve to do that. I'm just a guy out here trying to figure this thing out on my own. But through the encouragement of a couple friends of mine, I decided, you know what, I've got the ability to help people. And I made a couple Facebook posts one day, and all of a sudden that turned into a consulting business. And, I work with about 10 coaches right now, looking to add about another 10 coaches over the course of this next year. I really, really enjoy that. But going back 10 years ago, this wasn't even on my radar. It was all about, like, I just want to train pro athletes. That's it. That was my number one end game. And I figured, I'll just figure the rest of it out when I get there.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of having people, learn on the go, and it sounds like you and I, are both kind of graduates of trial and error university. And you know, how is that focused, the way you teach people now, knowing what you went through? And I know you say things like, I don't want people to make the mistakes that I did, but wouldn't you agree that some of those mistakes have formed you into who you are right now? How do you transfer that in terms of being a teacher and a mentor?
One, being very transparent and open about all my mistakes. I mean, I think that is incredibly important. I think that we're in an industry where egos drive a lot of stuff, and people want to act like they're the man and they got it all figured out. And I just am not that guy. I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm open about the mistakes I made. So I think starting there by sharing all my mistakes and how ego used to drive a lot of my decisions, as opposed to purpose, about how personal significance of being the man kind of blinded me to some opportunities and impact I could have had at an earlier age. So I think that's the most important thing is just being honest about that. And the way that I learned was very nonlinear. So for example, one of the very first books that I ever read on sport performance was Super Training. I'm 30 pages in and I'm like, what am I reading? I have no idea. But I committed to getting through the book. And since then, I've read it 3 times. I still don't know if I understand anything in the book, quite frankly. I say that jokingly, but I didn't know where to start because I had no mentors when I was younger. But like Elite FTS, that was my mentor, the Q&A, going back to the old T-Nation days, like that's where I found people that I respected. And then I found resources from the Russian manuals that I'm looking over here, they're sitting over here, to Super Training, to everything, Charlie Francis, all that stuff, I kind of stumbled upon. And I think I've developed a skill set now of being good at like what I call mining for gold. Like I know how to find the guy who knows what I need to know. And I think, like you mentioned, like our ability to connect, I think that one of my better qualities is I just really enjoy human connection. And that allows me to develop friendships and relationships relatively easy, especially with guys that I respect, because I'll spend money with you. I'm just that guy. I believe in reciprocity, and that's benefited me. So one of the things I coach guys to do is find your all-star team. Like, who's your top 5 guys? Like, you think if you met them or you could communicate with them that they could help fast forward your business and life to where you want it to be. And then again, I'm an open book with resources. And I think everybody in our industry wants to be a master, right? Where, read Robert Greene stuff, mastery, mastery, mastery. But before mastery comes competence. And I think people miss that. So, there's these like baseline levels of resources that I think everybody should be looking into if you're a new coach, as opposed to making the mistake that I made by going straight to super training and some of these more advanced resources that I'm not so sure ever really helped me, especially considering I'm really not sure anything I ever read in any of those books has translated to the environment that I work in now.
That's a good point, and I think everybody's always asking, like, what book do I read? What resource what video do I watch, and who do I follow? But from what you're telling me, it sounds like it's better to go, who can I connect with, and then who can I have a conversation with, and who can I, passively and actively learn from in different ways. And when I assume when you're teaching some of your staff and some of the people that you're mentoring and consulting with, you're giving them sort of some base foundational resource and saying, look, here's some things that you can read. But when it comes down to it, you're having conversations and you're getting to the kind of the real meat of what they need to learn, I assume.
Yeah, what I can do is I'm not good at teaching somebody something from A to Z. But if I can expose you to a resource that helps improve your competence and understanding, I'm really good at then filling in the gaps. And I'm really good at helping take that information and make it applicable to our environment out here on the floor. So that's been my strategy, is open up my resource vault. I've been doing this almost 20 years. I've probably bought every book everybody's told me to buy. I've bought every DVD somebody's told me to buy. I've got every online course you can think of, and I share that openly because I think we're also in an age now where people want shortcuts. They want people to tell you exactly, like they want to be told what exactly to do, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think it's a better strategy to say, look, go read this. Now, after you've kind of pre-qualified yourself to me as somebody that has the aptitude to learn and the desire to go learn, then we can have much better conversations about this stuff, and I can push you towards other resources or things that will help fill in knowledge gaps. And I'm big on this idea of filling in knowledge gaps, and not trying to do it all at once. It's just, if your weakness is in speed, do a deep dive for, a year on speed. If it's assessments, do a deep dive on assessments for a year. Not to say you neglect any of these other things, but there needs to be a priority focus on the knowledge gap that you want to close.
And would you say this approach is very similar to the way that you coach and work with an athlete? Like, you're not telling them exactly what to do every time and over cueing them and in their ear the whole time. Do you kind of find opportunities to intervene, see what happens, and fill in those gaps?
Without a doubt. I think when I was younger, I was probably a victim of being the coach that is over cueing, internal, external, kinesthetic. Let me put my hands on you. Let me, I wanted, I think, to impress athletes more with what I knew. I think that was, again, an ego driven thing, as opposed to like, what's the best way I can connect this for the athlete? And just what I've learned now about motivation, or really the falsehood of motivation, is that you need to give people autonomy and choice, and teaching someone how to self-organize and figure things out on their own, I think, is a lot more valuable than them needing a myriad of cues from you to get in the appropriate position.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, the whole over coaching and over prescribing for me has been a real struggle now, and I'm trying to work on the other end of that spectrum now, and and maybe it's because I'm lazy, but I want to do the minimum amount, to affect a real true response, right? Um, and when you're working with, say, a professional athlete, does anything change when you work with, say, a general population recreation person, or a youth athlete? Is it really different for you? Like, do you take the same approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think the higher, the more talented the athlete is, the more genetically gifted they are, the better they are at figuring stuff out. So I think, with pro athletes, you can get them to do what you want them to do, or what you're looking for, a lot easier than, say, a 12-year-old or 13-year-old, or a general population client. Now, whether that actually has to do with like pure coordination, or if it has to do with psychology, whereas like athletes are just more comfortable in an environment where they're being coached that way, where a 12-year-old and a gen pop client is in their head like, oh man, is he judging me? Am I doing this wrong? How do I compare to others? I'm not so sure I could discern the difference between which is more difficult. But I think pro athletes find a way to figure this stuff out a lot easier. But I'm not so sure if that's genetics or psychology.
And another thing I found with people like yourself is that this idea of establishing an appropriate relationship, and I'm not going to say necessarily close, but you're not going to be their buddies, but there's this mutual respect and admiration and shared passion. And how do you work that relationship? Well, again, let's talk about professional athletes because that's a little
Yeah.
different probably, but how do you make that work so that you have sort of this edge and this discipline, but at the same time you're relating to them?
So I'm a little different in that area. So if, like, for example, one of my longtime clients started with me in seventh grade. He's now in his fourth year in the NFL. Is Jordan Matthews. Like, I'll be in his wedding in February. So, he is a friend of mine.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, he's a brother. Over the past 4 years, we've had 5 kids drafted into the NFL that started in my program either in middle school or high school. So these are kids that I have a very unique relationship with. It's like we're actually into a lot of the same stuff, whether it's like shoe culture, music, strength training. So we can share a bond like friends like that. But there's also the mentorship component because they've known me since such a young and impressionable age. So I actually befriend almost all of our clients because I feel like if we're really close, you're going to be more receptive to the things I share with you. And I'm not one of those people that allows my friendships to keep me from telling people the things I think they need to get better at. Like, my friends who aren't in the sport performance industry might hate me for that. But if you spend any time around me, I'm going to try to get you to consider what changes you can make in your life that are congruent with your values and the ultimate outcomes that you want in life. And I do that with my friends, and I do that with clients. And I think that's just my approach to relationship building.
Yeah, and we always talk about the importance of communication, and I think obviously that's something that you thrive at. But how do you, again, when you're consulting with people and teaching, how do you approach that topic of communication and making sure you establish those connections, making sure that you're getting through to people? I know it was interesting. I'm coaching my son's basketball team. He's 13 years old, and I go in there and I'm like, okay, I can give them all this great information, and then most of it's like going, over their head, and I'm thinking, well, I'm giving you good information. How come you're not taking it? But I have to first relate to them on some level where they can understand what I'm saying. I can understand where they're coming from. How important is that communication piece in your coaching and your mentorship?
I don't think I have like a very specific strategy of how I address that, but I believe in the idea of meeting people where they are. So the language that you use, the intensity of how you communicate, all those things I think have to be geared based on the person you're dealing with. I'm a little more animated and aggressive with older and more elite athletes than I would be with younger athletes. I may try to explain some topics to an elite athlete that I would never try to explain to, say, a 12-year-old. So I think it's just meeting people where they are. And I, too, have really struggled with, especially young athletes. I want to connect the importance of the material I'm trying to share with them, but I just don't think they have the bandwidth, nor do their values say to them, okay, I should really try to comprehend this. They don't value, they value the end result. They don't necessarily value everything in between.
Yeah, and you talked a bit about it earlier about, being transparent and maybe telling people about the mistakes that you've made. Can you touch on some of those mistakes? I know for myself as a coach, I always wanted to come up with a perfect plan, and then I'd want to implement it as it was written, and I was very rigid about, oh, we have to do this much because that's what I wrote down and that's what the theory tells me. What are some of the things that you found over the years, like, hey, I could have done this better, or I made a mistake here?
I think one of the things that I share openly is, I'm 38 years old and I need both my hips replaced. And now, while I have cam hips, I was probably going to need them replaced at some point. The years of 14 to 17, I was heavily involved in powerlifting. And it was all max effort work. Like, we weren't doing speed work back then, at least the guy that I was working with. There was no sub maximal work. There was no making sure my squat pattern was perfect before we started loading the body. There was no FMS. There was none of that, right? So it was like, I'm training with these older dudes and they move heavy stuff, and that's what I'm going to do. And because I was pretty good at that, my ego encouraged it more, and that's what I did. But I'm at 38 years old. I need both my hips replaced. So one of the things that we struggle with a lot with young athletes, especially like middle school athletes, they want to put a ton of weight on the bar. They want to do the stuff that the big boys are doing. And we're constantly trying to encourage them that you don't need that. Like, we need competence and movement patterns first. We're not trying to throw the kitchen sink at you now, because we want to squeeze as much juice out of you later on when you enter into what we call our elite program, or our high school athlete program. And then, I think explaining to guys that are already strong that you may not need to keep getting stronger. There's a point of diminishing returns, and people like to do what they're really good at. I think that's another area that I've tried to communicate to some really strong guys, that we can take some weight off the bar, use our fancy gym aware, and drive specific adaptations that might be a little more valuable to them. And then again, guys like in certain populations who don't value strength, coming up with ways to show them that they probably should value strength a little bit more. For example, in the basketball community, we've had to find ways to, trick guys into putting more load on the bar by using examples of elite athletes that they may want to be like, and, an understanding that they've done some of these things and how it's benefited their career as well.
Yeah, and you talked about your own personal issues with your hips. What is your role, or what do you think the scope of your work should be in regards to rehabilitation? And, how do you work that? Do you have somebody that you refer to? Do you handle a lot of stuff in-house in terms of, using exercise as part of rehabilitation? And what are your thoughts there?
I think from a big picture philosophical standpoint, like, I love, Charlie Weingroff's, training equals rehab, rehab equals training. But I'm not a physical therapist. We don't have a physical therapist on staff, but we get a ton of referrals from the orthopedic community and local physical therapists. My problem with that, and I don't know how to make this sound non-judgmental, but I'll just say I've been relatively disappointed with the physical therapy and return to play protocols that I've been exposed to, at least in my local environment. So I rely heavily on my network. Bill Hartman is a guy who I have a great deal of respect for. There's a guy named Zach Couples that kind of came, I don't know if you know Zach, came through Bill's kind of coaching tree. And that's who we're using heavily right now, is Zach. So, like, right now we've got a 13-year-old. We're doing an ACL rehab on. We've got a 16-year-old that had a microdiscectomy. And now they've all been fully released, but they're not ready. And we bring Zach in. Zach does evaluations on Zoom. I kind of help use my hands, or I have somebody on staff use their hands with Zach's direction. And then we communicate with him about an optimal return to play protocol for these athletes.
That's great. So you do have some resource people that you call on, and even if you do it like over an online exchange, that sounds pretty cool. And I got a chance to meet Zach this summer when we're in the Hamptons, and I did a little demo there, and great guy. So I got to get him on the podcast as well. Now that'll segue into my next one is when we started up, you're like, I'm not a technology guy, but obviously you use technology as part of what you do. What are some key areas where you're, using it to either, improve what you're doing, improve the communication, improve the connection between people? How are you using technology?
So number one way that I'm using technology right now is really just through the gym aware, and then any type of heart rate variability stuff that we can talk an athlete into using it. So in years past, BioForce was something we used with our professional athletes, and we used the gym aware primarily with our pro guys too. I just don't want to guess about their readiness level. I'd like to use those two things to confirm their daily readiness level. But that's about the extent of my ability to use technology. I mean, we've got a K box and a K meter, but we use that very similar to how we use the gym aware. We're not using technology at a very high level at all. There's been times where we had a considerable amount of people doing HRV. It just became really hard to manage. We don't have a full sports science staff around here. It's me and my 6 guys and gal. And yeah, we've definitely got some limitations there. And I'm probably the weakest on staff when it comes to technology. Um, so yeah, it's hard for us to cross that bridge until I get a little bit better.
Yeah, is there anything else that you're looking at and going, hey, that kind of interests me, maybe we'll dabble there, or and I don't necessarily think you have to. I mean, if you're getting results, that's great, but is there anything where you're like, I'm kind of curious about that?
um, you know, not so much on the training. So, I mean, look, I'd love to have a 1080 motion. Like, I would love to learn how to use that more. The Halo headphones have been something that had really intrigued me. There's EMG stuff that's intrigued me, but for me, I guess I'm more intrigued on things that help facilitate recovery. So, like, binaural beats have been something that I've used a lot on myself. It's something that I recommend a lot to athletes. Any type of app or technology that teaches people how to meditate or become more efficient at meditation. I see that stuff having a lot of value. I think a lot of the athletes we deal with are so toned up that integrating that stuff into their life has a ton of value. There's some other stuff I've played around with, like human charger is something I've played around with in the wintertime. And when I was waking up really early, you just put it in your ears. You've got photoreceptors in your ears. It helps expose your body to sunlight first thing in the morning, which is supposed to help, circadian rhythm. You can use it for jet lag, those type of things. And I'm looking into a lot of other stuff like red lights. The Juve light is something that I've looked into. Apparently has the ability to help raise testosterone, which I haven't quantified that, but I use my Juve light, and I can tell you I think it has some value. What else here? I think I'm going to get an infrared sauna. I've read enough about these things now that I think they have some value. But yeah, I'm pretty nuts and bolts with everything else.
That's fine. That's fine. And you talked about the work you've done with professional athletes, and you have this tight relationship. When they get into, sorry, into an in-season scenario where they're competing week after week, they're in the NFL, or even some of the collegiate athletes or younger high school athletes. What is your role in season in terms of supporting them?
This thing right here runs my life. Largely due to constantly communicating with athletes. Guys that I trained 10 years ago, I still communicate with them, whether they're in the league or they're in the workforce. Kid that I started with in seventh grade just became a SEAL. He's on SEAL Team 7 now, and I communicate with him a good bit just to try to be an ear. I send them information that I think might be valuable or relevant. Um, yeah, just try to be that guy to help bridge the gap and the things they may not understand. Try to find soft tissue therapists for them in the city that they're in. Kind of use my lens and my connections to identify the best people in their area that they could then lean on for recovery and help in any area that they need.
Yeah, that network is really important, whether it's physical therapists. Are there other trainers in different cities where you're like, yep, you can go to that guy knows what he's talking about?
Yeah, I mean, perfect example. I give you two is one, Jordan Matthews, when Brett Bartholomew was at Exos, they gave him a free month or two or so. And communicating with Brett, I felt very comfortable with him going there and then coming to us afterwards. Because he did do his combine training at Exos, which I helped facilitate as well, just because at that point in time, we weren't really set up to provide what Exos could provide. And there was one other that was on the top. Oh, Mike Robertson. Anybody that's with the Colts that we've dealt with, I send to Mike and Bill. They've got a wide receiver there right now named Chester Rogers. Went undrafted, but went to Grambling. Incredibly athletic kid. Kept pulling his hamstrings. So we sent him to Mike and Bill. They helped get him in a better position. We gave him some stuff to kind of help get some velocity back in that thing, as opposed to just throwing him back out to practice the way they were before. And he caught a touchdown a couple weeks ago in the snow, and he's back playing full. And I rely heavily on those guys. I mean, I am nothing without my network. I confirm a lot of my beliefs and thoughts with the guys I respect, just because I just believe in that. I just don't believe in the idea of having to figure it out on my own. I don't see as much value in that as a lot of other people do. If there's a program I'm working on, and I need some input in some area, I've got no problem reaching out and saying, hey, look, I would love your opinion on this. And shoot, I'll pay people for those opinions.
Yeah, do you think it's healthy to have a bit of sort of self-critical assessment or, self-doubt? I mean, that doesn't sound like a very positive thing, but sometimes you have to have that in order for you to open up and reach out and establish those connections. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I do think it works both ways, though. Like, I do think at times it might be a weakness of mine because there are times that I don't think I trust myself enough. And I've got to kind of talk myself into certain things. And I might rely on that confirmation from someone in my network a little bit too much. So I think it can go that way. But more often than not, I think there's value in humbling yourself to people that you respect and know have a certain expertise in a certain area, and relying on them for input that could help benefit you and your clients.
Yeah, and if we talk about the athletes who've worked with and the business side, and everything we've talked about is business related. Let's not get that wrong. But from a marketing point of view, obviously you're getting a lot of guys through word of mouth and just the results you're getting. What else do you do from a business marketing point of view, whether it's the social media side? How do you plan in terms of business development and getting more people in the gym and getting more clients?
So, I mean, that's a broad thing. What I will tell you this is I've never paid a dollar for advertisement on the athlete side of our business. Now, on the general fitness side, that's a whole nother discussion. But on the athlete side, word of mouth, our position in the market, how long we've been here, that seems to attract the best athletes. And I'm in an area where there are a ton of amazing athletes. So we really benefit from that. From a positioning standpoint, I am the anti name builder guy. Like, I think a lot of young coaches are so worried about being the man and making a name for themselves in the industry, and it's a little nauseating to me. The way that I've made a name for if anybody knows me, it's simply because I've attended hundreds of seminars, I think is fair to say, over the past decade, and I've met coaches, I've sat in on things, and I've earned the respect of my peers. And then that translates into some level of credibility that people see on social media. And then I'm able to show that I actually do coach people. and you can go back and see for a decade or more that we've been coaching people and at a high level. But I could tell you what the best marketers in the world tell you you're supposed to do from an organic and paid standpoint. I mean, I've studied marketing at a relatively high level and know some of the best marketers in the world too. But my thing has been just show up, do good work, be a good coach, be a good person, connect with people that you value, invest in those people, and eventually you're going to have a name for yourself if you do that long enough. But there's too many guys 3 years in, they want to be the man. And again, I think that comes back to significance and ego, and that's an issue with me. I never would have considered the idea of consulting if I hadn't done some of these things for a really long time and felt like I had some value to share. And it's hard for me to understand how people develop products or things when they've only been in the industry for a very small period of time, or they're starting to host big seminars when they really haven't done a lot. And that, I'm not trying to, crap on anybody's dream. It's just something that I don't understand. And I think a slower approach dedicated to competence and relationship building will pay off long term much better than any social media guru strategy.
And on the flip side, do you think that sometimes this sort of humility that you have, it does hold you back in some cases, and maybe you should step outside of yourself and maybe promote yourself? And what do you think about that?
I totally agree. And I think that this has been the year of that. Like, I've been on more podcasts in the past year than I ever have. I've been more vocal about my entire life and who I am as a man, not necessarily just as a coach on social media, where before I was very reserved about that stuff and I didn't want to share any of it. It was like, it's nobody's business who I am as a person. They just need to know as a coach. And but no, I definitely think that's held me back at times. I mean, I could have developed products years ago. There's opportunities I've turned down just simply because I didn't think that I deserved it, maybe for a lack of better words. So who am I? I'm just a guy down here in Alabama doing work, trying to impact my local community. But what I found is people see value in that. And there is a tribe or a community of people that value the way I do things. And now I'm looking to connect with those people. You know, I've had a very unique upbringing in this industry, and my life has been very different than a lot of guys I meet in the coaching world. Like I said, I've been a father since I was 16. I mean, I'm a 38-year-old grandfather. You know, my 21-year-old daughter has a child. And I did not go to college. I'm all self-taught. So I just think that that's probably created some self-limiting beliefs that maybe humility hides. And it probably has held me back a good bit, but I'm okay with that because I have my integrity. I do well. I live my life congruent with my values. I'm living some level of success. Like I'm on a Skype interview with you right now. That's winning. Okay. I got I have a 3-year-old daughter too, who's sitting in the other office hanging out. And it's because I've created a lifestyle for myself to where my daughter's school shuts down. I can hang out with her all day and I can make time to, hang out with you and talk about this stuff. So I'm definitely having some level of success that I value. And I'm not so sure more money or more significance would pay off more.
But I get the feeling that if you could go out and feel you're making a difference, that's going to bring value to you. And so my question to you is, if somebody wants to call on you, what do you think you could bring to the table? Like if I said, "Hey, I want to bring you up to Vancouver, Andy. I want you to do a presentation." What would you present on? What would you tell people? What would be your expertise?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's the thing I've struggled with the most. I mean, like, I don't want to do speed presentations. I mean, I could talk about speed, but I'd rather sit and listen to you talk about speed. Yeah, I'm just being honest. But what I spoke about this year multiple times, what I call the 5 C's of an integrity-based sport performance business, and this empirical pyramid of sorts that centered around these 5 C's that I think any gym or business owner, if they take this serious, it gives them the best chance to create a business that serves them and that also serves a community and impacts a wide range of people. So I think my thing is now it's all about helping people become the best version of themselves. That's what gets me excited. Working with young coaches who want to do big things and me helping them sort through their own bullshit, for lack of better words, their own self-limiting beliefs, and helping them create a business that serves them. That's what I get excited about these days. I wish I got excited about reactive agility or periodization, or I just don't. And here's my other thing is I've been so frustrated going to seminars over the years because literally 90% of the content will not apply to what I do. You know, when you have kids rolling into your program at different times of the year, look, you have to have a construct for how you train them, periodization, so to speak. But you better be really flexible and you better be ready to deal with a lot of imperfection because it's just impossible to run a program in this environment based on the research. And I would challenge anybody that disagrees with that. I think there's probably a series of best practices that you could put together, and I'm not so sure I have the answer there. I mean, I can tell you what we do, but yeah.
No, but I think that's valuable, and I get into conversations with people all the time about, people want to get into sports performance, and they think, well, I have to work for a college or university, or I want to work with a pro team, and then they don't really see that there's other options out there, and maybe some options that could be really rewarding. Because you and I both know people in pro sports or college who are like, I can't do what I want to do. I'm under this guy or this head coach, we can only train him for 5 weeks in the NFL off season. So what am I supposed to do? So it's a lot of constraints that people are dealing with in those types of environments. But it sounds like what you're doing, and a lot of others like you, have this ability to be creative, to think on your feet, change things, and get results just based on your passion, your hard work, and your innovation, which I don't think you can necessarily develop in those environments. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. I've been fortunate enough to connect with a lot of pro strength coaches and college coaches. And I personally feel it's a very limiting environment. I would have a lot of difficulties acclimating into most of those environments. I think it would take a really unique environment for me to be truly fulfilled working in pro and in college sports. I think it also can create blinders and blind spots for you. If you spend too much time in one program, in one system, it can limit your understanding of other things, can limit your exposure to certain things. You can develop these heavy, confirmation bias, cognitive dissonance. Like this stuff is real. And I personally think that can limit your growth as a coach as a whole. And I think in the private market, you have an opportunity to blaze your own trail. And for many years, I was worried so much about, am I doing it perfect? And am I doing it right? And that just doesn't exist. So it's like, are there some principles that guide what you do? And can you make peace with the degrees of imperfection that exist in your program? And I think if you're not hurting people and you're getting results, that's a pretty solid approach to take.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect, and I dare I say, product for you to market out there is like, and even if it is, this is what I do. I think there's a lot of validity to putting that forward and going, hey, this has worked for me. These are the circumstances I work under. And I think a lot of people would buy into it. And I think that's something that I would promote, for you as well. Like, hey, go talk to this guy. If people want to visit you, what town are you in?
I'm in Madison and Huntsville, Alabama.
Huntsville, Alabama. So I've never been there. I'm going to come visit you at some point.
That's
So
awesome. I want you here bad, especially because, some of the stuff you did while you were in New York really got me thinking. Like our adult program, like a lot of they want to run and they all read about the value of sprinting and hill running. The problem is the tissue adaptations required to do that without injury are oftentimes not things they're willing to develop and work through. They want to go straight from, doing mock drills to flying 30s. And it's just like, patience, Danielson. So, I think that over time, using things like woodways and those, we can incorporate more sprinting into what we're doing here. So I see a lot of value in that too. So.
yeah, and that's why I really enjoy talking to people like yourself in these private environments, private sector environments, because you do have this freedom to kind of get into break new barriers down and go like, hey, why can't we do this? When I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, like you said, feel constrained and like, this is what everybody else is doing. This is what I have to do. I don't want to appear to be different or kind of bucking the trend. So, yeah,
Yeah.
are you doing any speaking, or is there any ways people can see you speak, or any workshops or anything like that?
I've got nothing planned for 2018 because my number one goal for 2018 is get my hips replaced
Okay,
and continue to build this mentorship thing. So I punted my hip surgery last year because of a lot of speaking opportunities I had, and
that's
plus
right.
just being chicken shit, to be honest. Like I was just scared to go under the knife. So I just said, look, I'm not going to plan anything yet. Maybe on the back end of 2018, I'll be able to do something like late summer, September, October, November, December. But April is going to be when I'm planning this surgery. I'll do my left hip first, and a couple weeks later do my right hip. And I'm really excited about that. I think that alone will help me get a little more fired up about coaching. I think things come full circle. I've had to kind of pull myself out of coaching to mentor and develop more coaches and empower them to take on a bigger role here. But I do see myself as my body's in a more healthy place getting back into coaching, because one of my favorite things is having the ability to demonstrate things and do things. And I just can't do a lot of that stuff anymore. But as I regain those qualities, which I certainly will, I could see myself doing more coaching, and that might open up, some more opportunities to speak about some of those things. It's, a guy that I know named Paul Reddick, marketer. He told a story recently that I heard that I think is really good, and it was about U2 and how a lot of times they would just show up and they would jam, and the Joshua Tree album, I believe, or one specific song out of these jam sessions, it came out of these jam sessions. And for me right now, I feel like I'm jamming, right? I'm over here on this side building the business, trying to figure out what my weaknesses are and where I need to get better as a leader, as a boss, so to speak. But I think by going through this process, it's going to open up holes and create kind of like my next thing, my next album, or my next big thing. But I think I've just got to show up and continue to do what I'm doing right now. And over time, I have confidence that the right hole will open up, and I'll find an opportunity in that.
Well, I'd honestly like you to document, the process of okay, you got to prepare for getting the hips done. How do you come out of that? What are some of the things you do? Because that's a real life process, right? And I'd like to get your take on it too. So I don't know if you're up for it, but uh,
I'm definitely up for it. I mean, definitely. Well,
yeah.
with that, I mean, it's just I probably need to hire a camera guy to follow me around because if it takes anything more than using an iPhone, I'm out.
But hey, that would be good enough. But yeah, I just want to say I really enjoy speaking with you. And when we connected last year, I could tell you had this energy and this focus that was pretty unique. And I want to keep in touch. Hopefully, we can meet in person in the next little while. Maybe get your hips done first, and then
Sure.
we can go for a little run or a sprint on the track.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
let's keep
Love
in
that.
touch. And what I'll do is I want to make sure on the website I'm going to put all your contact information and,
Okay.
and make sure that people can reach out to you. And definitely if people can visit you or set up some sort of meeting when you go to a certain professional development event or seminar, I
Yeah.
think it's worthwhile for people just to connect with you and talk to you in person. So I want to see if I can facilitate that.
I greatly appreciate that. I mean, like I said, I really think my greatest impact right now is helping younger coaches kind of figure out what they want to do and why, and what world they want to be in. And I am always open to communicating with coaches, whether it's in person, on the phone, social media. I give my number out all the time to anybody. I'm a little busier these days because I am getting married soon, and I was a bachelor for 8 years, so that gave me a degree of freedom that I just don't have anymore. And so to spend time with my family, I've got to shut down some of my communications. But if they can fit into my time block, I'm always available, and I'll certainly continue to make myself available.
That's awesome. I highly recommend it to everyone. So I'll put that information up and you keep in touch and
For sure.
yeah, we'll meet up hopefully in the latter part of 2018. We'll set something up and we'll meet up, Andy.
I would love that. I just want to show you this stuff.
I gotta send you there was a planning chapter that wasn't included, so I'm gonna send that to you once we get off.
Oh, that would be awesome. I would love that
And get your feedback on it.
for sure.
So thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, Derek.
We'll keep in touch and enjoy your Christmas.
Same to you, man. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, it's been great. Thank you.
Take care.